welcome to Divisive Issues, a spoiler-filled, foul-mouthed comic book podcast where two non-fans and one fan talk about comic books. It's actually two fans, but right now, Ryan, our host, is out, and here instead is me, Darryl, the non-fan.
We're retconning Ryan out of existence, actually. So it's always been two non-fans and one fan. So
yeah.
We went back in time and we rebooted. I'm Phil, and I'm a non-fan.
I'm Sly, and I'm a fan.
Or my clone.
No, this is like this is the Ryan-less saga. This is going to be the thing that our fans are going to say we need to retcon.
Yeah, so
bring Ryan back. What are you doing?
This is our lost years.
Oh, this is appropriate because we're doing our Legacy November / Thanksgiving. We never agreed on what we want to call it, but it's the year when one character goes away and we realize what we missed, like Superman a year before, all the different Captain Marvels the year after. So this year we lose Ryan. So Ryan's retconned out of existence. We're retconning back next time. And we're going to talk about Spider-Man.
But here's the thing. If we go back in time to try to bring Ryan back, we might accidentally have all of Europe get flooded by Atlantis or something.
That's a risk I'm going to take for Ryan's sake.
Okay. That's nice. That's the nicest thing you've ever said about Ryan.
It's only parents. If you try and do anything with parents, you fuck up the whole universe. I think you can just bring Ryan back and it'll be okay.
Okay.
So we're not gonna get too much backstory because we're covering a story that's meant to introduce new readers to a strange saga called Spider-Man: The Clone Saga.
But this isn't the original Clone Saga,
no,
right?
But this is the one that everyone thinks when they think of Clone Saga. The original Clone Saga was just a story with clones in it. So that's the only backstory to really give. In the 90s, so in the 70s, I should say. In the 70s, there was a Spider-Man story where Spider-Man gets cloned. And it had a finale where Spider-Man defeats his clone, and the guy created him, the mastermind that created him. And at the end of the story, there's like a puzzling note, like, how do you know you're the real Spider-Man? He's like, I guess I would just have to assume I am and live my life. And that was the case for a long time. Then in the 90s, Devil Superman happened, Nightfall happened where Batman got his back broken, Green Lantern went crazy, Wonder Woman stopped being Wonder Woman for a while, and DC was doing all these shakeups with their properties, and Marvel was like, I want a piece of action, I want to shake up our properties. And so at some point, one person suggested, what if we bring back the clone from that story and reveal he was the real Spider-Man all along, and the character we've been following ever since was a clone. And the stories we're covering are meant to introduce characters to the true Spider-Man's backstory for the most part. Though it does get into cloning stuff at the start.
So I have just a real quick miscellaneous question.
I'm just like, after I read this, and now I'm like, that doesn't line up with, I feel like, what I read, what you're telling me.
Yes, so the problem with the story arc in general, and the way the trade collects it as in a very condensed way, because I think they tried to condense all the, because Clone Saga gets really bad. It's like the Bleach of comics. It went on too long. Everyone hated it. But the trades like tried to condense as much of the good material in the early pages as possible. So when we're going through this, it's gonna jump from this guy's a clone, this guy's to this guy's not a clone. I'll point that out when it happens, but we'll get into that.
So I have a real quick dumb miscellaneous question. At what point did Spider-Man get 6 arms?
That wasn't in the 60s actually, but
okay.
Yeah.
Because for some reason when I think of the Clone Saga, I think of that.
That's because that's actually so. I think that might be because of the animated series, because that's what I thought when I thought of Spider-Man 2. The animated series mixed a lot of stuff together.
Okay, what if I never watched the animated series? Am I just dumb?
It might have been like popcorn shows most at some point.
Okay. All right, let's get into this. The cover is Spider-Man or Peter Parker reaching out of a vat, and he's got all this like green slime on him, and you're like, ooh.
Yeah. So these early stories are written by Jim DeMatteis, who is my favorite comic writer of all time. He wrote Ryan's favorite Justice League.
I thought you like what's his name, the guy that did the story of Captain Marvel going crazy.
He's probably my second, but Jim DeMatteis, I like them both for similar reasons, because they've always been very solid, and he never got big, so he never got an ego and never started writing shit like a lot of other writers became famous did. Yeah. I really think
I think the writing in this is so good, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree.
So, and the artist for this particular series is Liam Sharp, who drew...
Liam Sharp, baby!
Who drew Death's Head 2.
Yeah, did you see that, Phil?
Recognized it. I was like, I know this from somewhere, but now it makes so much sense.
That's what's happening, because it doesn't have the artist on the first like little bit that we were reading. As I was going through this, I'm like, this is definitely 100% a 90s ass artist.
Yes.
And once it got to Liam Sharp, I'm like, oh my god. And it was just reminding me of how like kind of incestual the comic book industry is, where you just see like one artist, like they're never in isolation.
Yes.
They're always like hopping over, especially like many famous infamous stories.
Well, it's like when you look at video game voice acting, and like every game has this guy is just the same person as this character from this game, and the extras in this game, the shopkeeper in this game.
Also to even greater extent, it's like in movies when the character, like, comics doesn't have that many like breakout stars. Like if you're a known artist or a known writer, you're going to be around a lot, because it's like having a blockbuster name in film. Like if you're Will Smith, you're going to be in a lot of movies. You're going to show up in a lot of productions and stuff like that. If you're like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you're going to do the same, because there's not that much big names to go around, you know?
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, I'm not like, oh, this is a terrible thing. It's just, it's always funny to me, because I just think Death's Head, I'm like, right, like these guys went on and did different things.
Yeah. And so,
like Death's Head isn't their one thing.
And so these 4 issues written by drawn by Liam Sharp were on the back of the main Spider-Man books. And so you flip the book over and read this backup story. Alright, and it opens with what looks like an embryo growing inside of just a liquid, a ton of liquid. There's a heavy narration: darkness, light, oblivion, life. Cells spin like universes, explode like suns. Chaos becomes order, formless becomes form.
A lot of this whole series actually is very narration heavy, more than it is dialogue heavy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I think that's why what the writing felt so good, is because it kind of felt like it was a book being narrated with pictures, like more than it.
Yeah, it was considerably like, I would say, like, if you're going to read this, you need to go into it wanting to read a story, like actual prose.
Yeah, the dialogue is pretty minimal, and the inner monologue.
That's true. Yeah,
of the characters is more important in almost all of these.
It's very prominent. Yeah.
Yeah. So so basically, it's broken up to many tiny panels, and you see this embryo grow to basically Peter Parker. You can tell it's Peter Parker. Narration says how he's growing toward an answer to the extraordinary destiny. The only question: who am I?
Yeah, and that's when he comes out of the pod or the vat, and he like wakes up for the first time.
Yeah, and Commissioner Gordon's sitting over
looks like
here at a computer.
So we actually saw this character before. I pointed him out and said, "This guy's a super villain." When we did the Stan Lee Spider-Man story, I said, "This college professor is actually a super villain." You guys are like, "Fuck you, Sly, comics are dumb." But now we get to see the payoff of that fucking story arc. Okay. So this is Miles Warren, and he looks like Commissioner Gordon, and he's like, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I created you." And he starts saying, "Come over here. You'll do as I say. I created you." And he starts.
He goes to punch him, but then the Peter Parker clone reacts on impulse and instinct, grabbing Professor Miles' Rowan's wrist with astonishing swiftness, nearly crushing it in his iron grip.
And he can't understand them really. He's just he woke up for the first time existing basically, and his spider sense is just going off constantly. And he doesn't know what that is, so he just feels like he's going crazy. And he can't. He just doesn't know.
And he hurts the man, and he feels like ashamed that he could bring another agony to another being. So he's like, "What's happening?" And then Dr. Miles Warren, the Commissioner Gordon guy, uses a thing to incapacitate.
Well, he starts yelling at him. You insufferable animal! Like you're blind to the value of life as a wretch I cloned you from." And so then Peter Parker collapses, and as he's on the floor, Dr. Miles just starts beating the shit out of him. Saying, "I hate you, Parker, for what you did to her. To me, I hate you." And so, basically, this becomes the clone's life for a while. By Warren.
I have a question, because this Dr. Miles is a pretty significant character. Like, everything he does here, he kind of starts off this whole Clone Saga we're going on.
Yes.
But it never explains why he hates him. He just, Peter Parker had done something to him. And, because this is a pretty severe revenge fantasy that he's planning out.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted you guys to read it as is, because I want to see if you guys could catch on what's going on. So I do think the story doesn't fully explain that well. So all
I know is he doesn't like him for some reason. I'm like, is it his wife?
No.
Was it his daughter? Did something?
So I don't know if you guys all know Gwen Stacy. She was love interest in Amazing Spider-Man, the reboot. Emma Stone. Gwen Stacy, like by most accounts, is by most like considerations is the true love of Peter Parker's life. Like Mary Jane's who he got stuck with.
Well, that's like the lost love of his life.
But like whenever they have like Peter gets into a fantasy world, he's with Gwen Stacy. So like, which is why I find his relationship with Mary Jane very interesting because they're kind of like two flawed people like who ended up together, which I think is more interesting than the ideal romance that Gwen Stacy.
Like a Superman Lois. I mean, Clark actually had Lana Lang before this.
But like Lana, like he always loved Lois more. Like Lana was just his first love. Like, but everything seems to indicate Peter loved Gwen more. But Gwen died at the hands of the Green Goblin, and so Miles Warren is basically like a replacement for the Green Goblin. He's like an emotional, like a personal connection to Peter, like Norman Osborn was. And he becomes a creature known as a jackal, which looks like the Green Goblin in a lot of ways.
I thought it was him until he said jackal, and I'm like, okay.
Me too. And then
he's basically Green Goblin. He's basically Green Goblin because Green Goblin, the way he dies in Spider-Man 1, like in Spider-Man 1, if you see Spider-Man 1, the first Spider-Man movie by Sam Raimi, they fight on top of the bridge saving Mary Jane, and then afterwards, Green Goblin killed himself. That's essentially what happened in the comic, except it was Gwen Stacy in that position, and Spider-Man failed to save her. And that's why Miles Warren hates Spider-Man and Peter Parker, because he failed to save Gwen Stacy, who Miles Warren loved.
Okay, so he loved Gwen too, and he felt like Peter failed him. And then he just somehow became Green Goblin 2.0.
He basically went insane and developed a split personality, which is what...
I think that's the other thing too, like it'll get mentioned later, where it's just like, they mentioned that Miles Warren is struggling with like an internal like persona, like the Jackal and Warren himself.
Yeah.
And I never got the feeling, he just seems like really mad all the time here as the old man. Like I never got the feeling that he was torn in two.
That is one thought, because Peter says like he knows Miles is a good person, and that's where it comes into.
Yeah, where I'm like, I don't know, like this old man right now, he like drugs him, he locks him in a cage right now, and I'm like, is this a good person?
Yeah, so like that's the one thing, because they're going off like the audience's familiarity, the comic book audience's familiarity with Miles Warren as Peter's professor.
That's true.
But they don't clarify enough in the story that the clone will feel that way about him. That he's just a piece of shit to Peter Parker, and he keeps drugging him and hitting him. And Peter's like, "Fuck this, I'm leaving." And he realizes he's stronger than Miles Warren, and he beats the shit out of him and escapes.
But for a long time, he doesn't want to hurt him, so he's like, he just lets it keep happening to him. He endures it, and then eventually he's like, he was too afraid to access the part that he can fight back against someone, and that's when he, Which it like explains too. I don't know if it explains it here, like later on, where it's like him not wanting to hurt people is all the Peter Parker programming, which I thought was really interesting, because it's like it's this person that's trapped in this thing, and it's like, I don't know why, but I don't want to hurt this person, and I don't know where that comes from. Like I don't have like a understanding of that hurting people is bad, like a childhood. It's just programming in your brain to be like, this would be bad if I hurt them.
Well, that's a recurring like theme of this character's arc. I'm gonna call him. His name becomes Ben Reilly, the clone.
Yep.
So I'm gonna just call him Ben. Ben struggles with the fact that he has all these memories of like how to be a good person, stuff like that, but they're all just programs in his brain. He never actually lived through his experiences. He's just being told that's how he's supposed to live. And throughout the story, he's trying to fight against his programming, but he can't because it's too ingrained of who he wants to be.
It's also it's hard to, because we're skipping so much of this just talking about it, but like it's just done well, like, because as he's getting beaten, the part of him inside that makes him not want to hurt people also is the part of him that says that humans don't deserve to be treated this way, and I'm a human too, and that's why I have to get away. Like, no person should ever be treated like this.
I like this as like as he's about to be drugged again, and Miles says, soon I will send you out into the world as Spider-Man, and you will be so firmly established in that identity that you will never even recall that any of this ever happened. And then the narration comes up, and this is Ben thinking this. The words, or not Ben thinking this, is about Ben. The words still mean little to him, but the harshness on the tone, the bile in each syllable, is almost as painful to him as the chemicals that boil in his veins. Why, he wonders, does this man hate him so? Why must every visit end in an orgy of physical abuse, beating so severe that he lays, whimpering for hours afterwards? And it's very evocative, and it's like, especially because it just throws you right in here where you don't even know what's going on. You're just as clueless as this guy, other than just like, this is Spider-Man. That I found like this arc very compelling because this is like almost like a horror story where it's like, what do you do if you just wake up and you're a clone of Spider-Man, but
and you're being
you don't
tortured.
know who Spider-Man is,
and he's literally crying, beating the door down, saying, "I'm human, I'm human."
Yeah.
So Peter escapes and he starts climbing the walls like a spider can.
Spider-Man can.
He starts at nighttime jumping from skyscraper to skyscraper, and
he's like his face is sweating. It's like, how is this possible? How can I do this? No man can do this.
And he slips and he starts falling, and he thinks like, I should die. He thinks, I'm not human. I'm some kind of monster. And if I was, the professor wouldn't have treated me that way. But he decides, manages to save himself and starts climbing up the wall. And
he can't not say, like his Spidey sense like just forces him to reach out his hand kind of and save himself. A lot of this is also reminiscent of like Frankenstein monster stuff where like
very much.
he's like created and he doesn't understand the world because he's new to life and he's being beaten by his creator and he's just like running from this like I don't know what to do and he's stronger than the creator but he like doesn't use his power that way because he doesn't know. He's like a naive kid kind of in the fact that he hasn't existed yet.
So then the Jackal shows up and he looks like the Green Goblin, like exactly.
Yeah, he's a Green Goblin with a jetpack.
So the Jackal is just Green Goblin without any of the purple stuff on his costume.
But he looks a little more like realistic, and this was one of the things like I kind of didn't like is like you couldn't tell if this is a suit that he wears or if he somehow turns into this guy.
It's a suit.
It doesn't look like a suit at all. It looks like
it looks too realistic. Like the face especially looks too realistic.
That's a problem with Green Goblin in general. That's why in the movie they gave him a plastic mask, but when they were doing like tests for it, they wanted to give him like an artificial face on top of it, which I think they should have done. But it is a weird concept that this guy will go crazy and put on this realistic Halloween costume and do stuff. But
yeah, and the fact that it has like its own set of teeth and stuff.
Yeah, it's weird. But Peter Parker starts fighting. He knows. He says, "Oh, this is
not Peter Parker, Ben Reilly."
Ben Reilly. So Ben Reilly knows that this is...
or is it Peter Parker?
That's what I was like. Like when you're like, this isn't Peter, this is... Ben.
We'll get into it.
Okay.
It's going to get enough confusing if I explain it as we go. I'll explain at the end mostly for the most part, because it's going to get confusing already. Yeah. Alright, so Ben starts fighting. He knows like Jackal is a bad guy deep down, so he starts fighting the Jackal, saying, must have been the Jackal that caused now Miles Warren.
And like he even knows to stay away from the claws as he's fighting because the tips of the claws are drugged. And again, the knowledge seems to erupt fully formed from some unconscious pocket.
Yeah,
and then he realizes he while he's fighting, he's like, maybe I'm not a monster. Maybe I'm more than a man, but I'm not a monster. Like I'm a superhero basically. He like has that in him where he's like, I have this power that I can use.
Great responsibility.
Yeah, that's gonna come up a lot where he constantly feels like he feels the superhero like in his blood, in his DNA.
Yeah, so he starts beating like Miles Warren to death. He wants to stop, wants to make him proud, but he can't. After all this happened, if only they, whoever they are, could be here for him, help him out, help him find his way to...
It's because he's thinking, the people he's talking about in that narration, he's thinking about Uncle Ben and Mary Jane and Gwen, and he doesn't know who they are, but he like feels this attachment to them. Yeah. And he's like, the violence that I'm doing right now would appall them. I know that, even though I don't know who they are.
But then Gwen Stacy shows up and says, I know you're not a killer. You're the kindest man as ever lived. And it says how, if asked, you couldn't tell you her name, nor she'd tell you his. But each knows they love each other, cherish each other, more than life itself. And Peter stops us walking towards her, and they embrace, which gives Green Goblin the opportunity to hit Peter Parker with his claws from behind and knock him unconscious. Yeah, and then he takes two of them as the police show up and flies off with them.
Yeah, he does like the dumb thing as the police are coming after him. He's like, "What? Are you gonna jump off the roof and fly away after me?" I don't.
That's funny because this is like a very grim story, but Jackal is written like he was in the '60s, like very
pretty campy.
Yeah, very very like my work is not done yet. My plan will be hatched. And he flies away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then the cuts to Peter Ben putting on the Spider-Man costume. And the title's now "Who Am I?" As he yells it out loud.
And then we get an Evangelion-esque sequence of like the Ben's being interrogated by Professor Miles Warren, and it's like showing all these like other people, like the faces of everyone around them.
That face of Miles Warren, half him, half Jackal, looking so evil down at him is crazy. He looks so evil. How can this guy not be evil?
It's the jackal side of him.
Yeah, the jackal being released. So,
and they're basically talking to him. It's like, remember this? Like, think about like Uncle Ben talking to you, like when he was a little kid, and when he had heard how his like parents had died, and he's like, "No, I won't listen." But then he's like inserting himself into like little Peter, and then he's running away from Uncle Ben, saying it's my fault that they died, and the jackal picks him up. It's very like, you could see it like a very surreal sequence in like a movie.
Yes,
like how quickly it's moving from scene to scene.
Yeah, it's obviously some kind of like inner torment that he's watching all these traumatic scenes from his life, where he has first his parents die, and then he blames himself for that, and then Uncle Ben dies, and that's his fault too. So.
And Aunt May is even saying, "Why, Peter? I loved you so much. Why did you let him die?" And the jackal's like, "Answer the question, Peter."
With his tongue sticking out.
Yeah, and the jackal says, like, you want some to understand and control the situation. That's why you always blame yourself for when these things happen. And all solely, like, all of his family in this dream sequence tell him, "We forgive you, Peter. It's not your fault." And the jackal says, "No, it is your fault. Fuck you." And Peter says, "No, you won't confuse me your lives anymore." He's just fighting back against the jackal. And Miles Warren in real life, outside of this dream sequence, real Miles Warren is like, yes, like
all according to Kaikaiku,
Miles Warren in this Clone Saga is all according to Kaikaiku, basically.
Because this is like a 5-year plan that he's planning, right?
This plan it's not like that out of the this part at least is like
later on when they start shooting more clones, it becomes
this part makes sense where he's like he wanted him to struggle with that trauma and become emotionally attached to these memories which aren't his really, but he feels the attachment. And then he basically unifies them and identifies with it under the guise of all those people in his life saying, "We don't blame you. You're Spider-Man. You're a hero." So So
now what happens is now the clone thinks 100% I am Spider-Man, which is what Warren was trying to do. I thought
this was a really clever way to, because like, how do you convey the fact that you're trying to make this clone buy into these memories? And I think this was a cool way to do it, to have him go through some of them, give him a challenge in the form of the jackal being like, "You're not a hero," but the people that he has this weird attachment to are like, "You are," you know what I mean? And
I agree.
He starts to really identify at his core that his identity is Spider-Man, Peter Parker. And I thought that was really clever, I thought.
Yes. So now Spider-Man wakes up. First he wakes up and Miles Warren drugs him again in a really pointy sequence. Then he falls asleep again. He wakes up in a baseball stadium.
Well, this is Ben Reilly wakes up.
Yes. And Ben Reilly wakes up in a Spider-Man costume with Peter Parker next to him, and they both say, "Who the heck are you?" And they're both in a baseball stadium now, or I think it's the college stadium from Peter's college.
It's Shea Stadium.
This is like that. It's like the meme where both Spider-Mans are pointing at each other.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my god, it is.
So this is where this is like an homage to No, I'll explain for the end. So it's very confusing. Okay. So
sure.
Basically, then it tells a narration of basically what happened during the original Clone Saga from the 70s. Peter and Ben started fighting each other. Both saying, "I'm the real Spider-Man. Your trick is you're part of."
Wait, can you clarify the timeline here? This is. What do you mean? This is the original.
This is the original 70s story arc, but in Marvel timelines 5 years ago, from the modern era.
Okay.
But
wait. Okay. So they didn't do a time skip after this story was done. This was all just.
This is a flashback. This is all a flashback to the 70s stuff to tell new readers more about what Ben's backstory was.
Oh, okay.
I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah, because I thought this was part of like a 90s actual arc.
No, this is all back. This is all, like I said, it was in the back of the comic. You're reading the main Spider-Man comic. This guy Ben shows up.
If anyone's like confused why me and Phil are just like, what's happening here? It's because after this is going to happen, we're going to skip ahead 5 years, but it's going to be told like retrospectively. So it's like 5 years ago this happened, and the 5 years ago this happened takes place after this story.
Yeah.
So we thought this was in the present, then it jumps ahead, but apparently this is way in the past, and then it'll just jump ahead a little bit, but still talk about the past.
And to make matters worse, because like I said, these stories were not meant to be bunched together. They just all were for the trade. These were all written at different points in the Clone Saga. At different points, we decided different things about what's continuity and what's not. As far as we are now, Ben's the clone. That's what the story is written. That assumption, Ben's the clone. And so Peter and Ben fight, and meanwhile the Gwen Stacy, which I forgot to mention, So this was not the real Gwen Stacy. This was Gwen Stacy's clone. Miles cloned her first in order to get her back, and she basically appeals to Miles' Warren side of him.
Because let's be real, if you have a cloning machine, you're probably gonna be cloning a lot of people.
Yeah. Especially if you're traumatized by the loss of your obsessive love, that you're just gonna clone her, I guess.
Yeah, this student that you love.
Yeah. Also, I will say, this is the type of comic story in concept that I always make fun of. Where I'm like, fucking clones everywhere. Everyone's a clone. Who's a clone? But I like that. that intro waking up of the clone was very well done, very well executed.
And I also think on top of it, the thing is, like, this is my first experience with the Clone Saga. And if you told me Spider-Man has one clone that is just, like, has been cloned from him, that's been programmed to think he's Spider-Man to fight with Peter Parker, I'm like, I buy into this. Out of all the comic, like, bullshit, I'm like, this I can buy into. Although I'm also like, why aren't there more, like, clones running around if, like, this dude can make a cloning machine? Yeah. But, like, Reed Richards, the smartest man in the world, can't, the fact that doesn't.
Like, he clones them, but they're not just genetically identical. They have their memories. I'm like, how did that work? But whatever.
Yeah, that's true. So.
Yeah, that's a fair argument. That's always a weird thing about clones and stuff.
But again, the execution here for me was so well done that I'm like, I actually don't give a shit that this is like kind of weird. That like I can understand when you guys, you and Ryan in particular, are like, yeah, this sounds crazy that this guy ran on a treadmill and punched his mom or whatever. But it's in execution, it's good. This is one of those times I'm like, this was really well done, and I was very invested in this dumb shit.
I feel like Phil references Flashpoint as much as I reference Nemesis.
It's because it's so dumb.
That's his wrong era of stupid. But so the clone Gwen Stacy basically appeals to Miles Warren's human side, and basically he comes to his senses for a moment. And the plan was the two Spider-Man will fight while Ned Leeds, who is for some reason the fat Asian guy in the Spider-Man movies.
Oh yeah.
But in the comics, he was a Peter Parker mirror. He was, but that's not important. I'm not gonna get to that. But basically, he was in danger. He was put next to a bomb, and so the point was that the Spider-Man were fighting who gets to save Ned Leeds. But Miles decides, no. Now that I'm back seeing for a second, I'm going to save Ned Leeds. And basically, an explosion. He frees Ned, and a bomb goes off. Looks like the Jackal's dead, and then in the explosion, it looked like the clone was there too in the original story. And so Spider-Man threw the clone's body in the smokestack, not knowing he was still alive, which was a big thing to do.
Check for the pulse, Spider-Man.
Oh, that's why the burns.
Yeah, so he wakes up. So the clone wakes up in smokestack, and he's like, I gotta get back to Aunt May. She must be worried about me. I gotta get back to Mary Jane. And he goes back, and he sees Mary Jane in another Peter Parker's arms, and he says, "This must be Miles Warren's real plan, to have this clone steal my life from me." Like, and he's about to go enter and confront him, but then he says,
he has like an explosive pain in his head as soon as
a psychic explosion that started at the roots of my being and radiated up and out, ripping through every cell in my body. What is it? Cracoom! The lightning strikes. I'm the clone.
And he says, I threw a tantrum. I kicked. I screamed. I wept. I howled. I prayed. An unmanned, haunted by recollections of an unlife. I prayed there in the rain for help, for even this shred of hope. Because I had what I had to do: collect my memories, pack my bag of programmed lives, and leave. Leave Aunt May and Mary Jane, the Bugle and ESU, my friends, my enemies, myself. Peter Parker was alive, but I was dead and buried. And somehow, in the long years of wandering ahead, I was going to have to resurrect myself. But first, I needed time to grieve and mourn. And it just shows
Spider-Man.
Rain falling on Spider-Man.
He's just crying in an alley. It's really well done because like it really does. It's great that you have his perspective. He's like, I'm gonna go home to my wife or whatever, and like. You're like, wait, this isn't my life. Like, that is literally, I have the attachment and love for all these people, but that was never me. And like,
I wasn't the person that formed these bonds. I just have the memory.
Yeah, and that's like, I can't imagine what that is.
And I was really invested, partly because I'm writing a book at least similar with the yourself versus yourself kind of stuff. But it's also because, like, where do you go from here if you have, like, this clone that's like, I'm attached to all these things and I have all these memories, but this isn't my life. Like, what do I do? And I'm like, yeah, what do you do? Whereas like the comic book stuff of like, I'm an evil gangster and you're never gonna stop me, Spider-Man. Like that's never interesting to me. Whereas with here, it's like I have no idea where you go from here. It's like the cheap artist, like the writer thing to do is, the clone blows up and dies. That way, Spider-Man lives a happy life. That was what we did in the 70s. You're like, what do we do with the clone? He fucking dies, whatever. Yeah. Whereas here, it's like, what would you do if you were a clone but still alive?
It is crazy too, because like I don't know how you're not just traumatized for life forever. Like, because like, how do you ever let go of those attachments? And that's what a lot of this story ends up being upcoming, which is like why I thought this was so good, because like you don't want to fuck up yourself's, like your other self's life and like take it from him, but at the same time you're like, but this should be mine, but it's not mine. It's just
it's both like a conflict of like he kind of does want to kill Peter Parker and just replace him, but he also has the like morals of Peter Parker. It's one of those things where we had complained about during like the Captain Marvel stuff, where it's like the other universe self comes over and they're always like a psychopath murderer that has no morals or stuff. Whereas here you see him constantly struggling with the morals, even though he has like nothing to rely on anymore in his life. It's like, if I died, no one would miss me. It's like, why not just kill Peter Parker and do this? But he's constantly fighting back against that because he knows it would be wrong.
Yeah, and he tries, well, we'll save that for the next part.
Yeah. All right, so now we're getting to the next series of backup issues.
The Parker Legacy.
Yeah, this one is written by Jimmy Timus again. But the artist is now John Romita Jr. John Romita Jr., if you read only his newer stuff, like a lot of people say he's shit. But when you have him with the right inker, I think he's one of the best. I think he is the best Spider-Man artist of all time. And I think this is especially when we get to last year's, is a really good example of what a great inker can do for his pencils.
I think like his form is really good. It's one of those things where like when I was looking at Liam Sharp's stuff where I'm like, you're really good at drawing like jackals and monsters and grinning evil guys. When it came to like maybe like women or regular looking dudes, like he's incapable of doing it. But it's sort of like with Romita Jr., where I was looking at his stuff, and some of his men are like a little bit weird sometimes.
He has a very blocky art style.
I wouldn't say he's bad.
That's what I like. That's what I like. That's what I like about it, because it's so distinct. It's so his, and for me, this is what Spider-Man art looks like to me. He drew Spider-Man for so long. This is what I think of Spider-Man. I think of John Romita Jr.'s art.
And I think you said he did the art for the rest of this now.
Yeah, he did the art for last year's too.
The art of one character that will show up later is, I think the art defines how good he portrayed, like how like
I can
the art of him is so good, because he looks kind of weird, but like it's so he stands out, and it captures him a lot. I think, like you said, going back to Liam Sharp stuff, like I'm looking at these Gwen Stacy's and Mary Janes, and like they almost look like goblins themselves. Like,
yeah,
they have like goblin-like faces.
That's
yeah, he's really good at like drawing Deathhead and not people though.
Yeah, that's that people are.
Yeah, and Romita Jr. I think draws Spider-Man really well. He doesn't look blocky. When you see Peter Parker, you're like, ugh, like this is a WoW character or something.
But I also think WoW has a very definitive style that matches it very well too, for the most part.
Yes.
So it basically starts where the last one left off, with Spider-Man mooring himself in the rain.
And we were just saying how he's like, why he wants to kill the other Peter and just replace him, but then here he also is like, I just want to kill myself. Like, why do I exist if everything I know is not mine? And he walks in front of a truck, and his spider sense is going off, and he's just like, just whatever, just kill me. But he still stops it at the last second, and he's like, shit, like I have Peter Parker's like not wanting to. That believing suicide is a sin.
Die.
Yeah, like, and so he fucking runs at the truck driver, smashes his window, saying, "Why didn't you kill me? Why didn't you kill me?"
Tears off the windshield, and yells that at him. But then he stops knowing that this man isn't to blame for what's happened. Parker is.
Yeah. And so he goes to sleep under a bridge, hoping this was all a bad dream. But he wakes up, deciding he has to find the courage to live. So he goes into Peter Parker's apartment and starts stealing shit so he can go on the run.
Well, he's like, this is a really great touch too, because he's like, I remember as Peter Parker that I have all these clothes I've been meaning to donate that I haven't donated yet, so I'm gonna wear those, and I know where like what page I left this money in for emergencies. So it's like it's like great that he knows like the ins and outs of this person's life, because he's like I can remember not. Like, I feel like this happened to like everyone. Like, I'm gonna donate these clothes that I'm not wearing anymore, and they're in your closet forever. And it's like such a personal touch that he's like, this is my stuff that I,
Yeah, here's one homeless man who could certainly use
and
that.
he even though he like he said, like basically his stuff, he feels like he's stealing from somebody else because he feels bad about taking it from Peter Parker, all his money and stuff. So he goes.
He hangs outside of like Aunt May's house real quick too, because he thinks about like going in to see her. And it's just like a nice moment of him because like he wants to return to her because Aunt May would always find a way to make it better. But he's like, I can't do this. Like, I can't put it through. I'm a man. I'm a Spider-Man now.
Man. So he goes to a bus station and basically he's like, he tells the clerk, I want to go as far away as possible. I don't know, San Francisco. And on the bus, a fat guy's glasses starts talking to him, talking about this.
Clifford Gross.
Yeah.
Good last
name. And he starts talking about, the shoe business could be a tough nut, real tough nut. But I busted my hump and build my chain up to something special. You gotta treat the customer with respect. And he's basically like the obnoxious guy in the bus that talks to you. And Ben is like, look, I'm tired, I'm in a really bad mood, so do me a favor and shut up your stupid fucking life. And he also...
Just trying to be friendly.
And Clifford also mentions his wife and kids. That's what makes Ben say, like, fuck off. And he falls asleep.
Yep, and you get like a nice moment too where it's like he feels the inclination to apologize for being so unforgivably rude, but it's Parker who wants to apologize.
Yeah, he's struggling here with like, my instincts are telling me that this is wrong, but that's really just Peter in me. Like, is that me?
Like he doesn't know as this person, as the clone, it's like, what would you do in this situation? Not this guy who you just have the memories and inclinations of.
And Ben, God damn it. Ben falls asleep on the bus, and he has a dream where all Spider-Man villains are like, get up and fight us, come on! And so Ben as Spider-Man starts fighting them, and then Jackal shows up saying, what are you guys wasting your time fighting this goddamn thing for? It's not really a man, it's a Pinocchio, look what's underneath the mask. And he pulls off...
He takes off the mask, and then it's Peter Parker's face. He's like, Jackal, no, please. So he's like, it's human. It looks like a human, doesn't it? It sounds like one, but look what he really is. Then he starts ripping off his face, and there's just nothing on it.
His face is zero.
It's absolute nothing.
Failed experiment.
Yep.
And Spider-Man starts falling down like a vortex, begging for Aunt May.
With as much value as a lab rat. And he's falling in, he's like, that's not true, I'm a man. Uncle Ben, Aunt May, tell them, please. And they just look down kind of like disapprovingly.
But then he wakes up on the bus, and it's the screaming of a bunch of passengers. And it's like Spidey senses going off. And it's because the bus in the rain is now veering off the road. Yeah. And so he has like the inclination where it's like, I should act as Spider-Man. Like, I need to do something. I need to save them. But the clone himself would rather just see the nightmare just end here and now with everyone.
Yeah, he just wants to die at this point. And so
here's a question. Would he die in a car accident? No, right?
Probably not.
Because he was like, if the Hulk can punch him, I'm like, you don't die in car accidents.
That's true. But this is one of those things where, like, I was so kind of like interested in the story. I wasn't thinking too much about like the fact that he could punch.
I didn't think about that while
you're right though. He wouldn't die.
Because even if the truck hit him, he wouldn't die. But it's like how do you kill yourself as fucking Spider-Man?
And so he basically like stuck. Like, do I save the bus or not? And but luckily, the bus driver manages to get the bus on course and get him off road. But they blew out a tire in the process, so everyone on the bus has to get off and go to a nearby hotel.
Yeah. And I like this because I was so ready for I was looking out for all the comic book tropes. So it was like Sly, where you read manga and they're like shonen, and you're just waiting for all like the shonen tropes to come in. You're like, whatever. Like, I was waiting for him to be like, even though I'm a clone, I'm still a good, decent person. I was waiting for him to stop the bus, but he doesn't. He just sits back and lets this happen,
but
and then
in the end doesn't save the bus.
Yeah, and I like that kind of like seeing that struggle in a character where they don't do the right thing when the right thing comes up.
Yes. So then everyone else on the bus is going towards the free hotel. A hotel offered to give him a free room, but Ben is like, I'm just going my own way. But Clifford Gross is like, hey, you're going the wrong way. And he's like, what do you want to go around in the highway on a rotten night like this for anyway? And Ben's like, wants to tell him to piss off again, but he's like, okay, I'll go with you. And so then he starts telling me about they start talking at the hotel, and
they're at like the bar inside the hotel, and like Clifford Gross is like, you're hurting, buddy. Life turned around, bit you on the butt. I understand, because like I'm like you, but the wife left me. The kids decided I'm the biggest yutz on 2 feet. and his business has been running into the ground. And Spider-Man's just like angry and drunk, and he's like,
and he says, like, oh, I thought you were this big man, but Gross is like, nah, I was like playing all that stuff up. I talk big, but I'm just a big worthless nobody. Sometimes I think if I just disappear from the world, it'd have no impact. No one would notice, no one would care. Stupid, huh? And Ben just knocks over his chair, saying, not stupid, little man. Not stupid at all, because you're right. You are nothing. A shadow of a man. Faceless, worthless, useless. So why don't you do it, huh? Why don't you just fucking disappear and never come back? And he starts breaking...
Kicks over a table, starts throwing obvious, like, furniture around.
Like, he's mostly yelling this at himself, but he's taking it out on Clifford Gross because he sees himself in there. He's like, yeah, you should just disappear. Like, I should too.
Yeah, but then...
And even the bartender pulls a gun on him because he's like, all right, like, you've had 2 beers, get out of my bar. And then he, like, grabs his arm and starts twisting it. He's like, my wrist. He's like, you have no idea what I'm capable of.
Ben starts using his Spider-Man powers to break his wrist. And he basically, he stops and, before he does anything serious, and runs away with the bartender in pain and Mr. Gross looking very confused.
He's like ashamed here. He's like, why do they have to clone me from someone who feels ashamed every time he hurts someone?
Yeah.
Yeah, someone that doesn't drink.
Yeah, too. So he's like super drunk too.
So he's like, the bartender probably called police on me. I gotta go now. But as he's walking through the hotel hallways, his spider sense is going off, and he kicks down the door and sees,
thinking that it's like a villain, like Electro or Kraven or Dr. Octopus.
He wants it to be one, and so he can spew his pain at that person, feed his rage to them.
Yeah.
But no, it's Clifford Gross putting a gun to his mouth, and Ben jumps at him and knocks the gun out of his hand. And Clifford says, "Why'd you stop me? You're the one who told me I was worthless. Said I should just disappear." And Ben screams, "I was wrong. I was wrong." And he says, "Okay, you lost it all. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Maybe that means you get to start over again from scratch, build something better. Maybe it's not the end of your life, but the beginning." And they basically talk until morning comes. They meet at the bus.
He gets back on. Yeah, he gets back on the bus, and Clifford's like, you know what? I'm gonna go see my kids. I'm gonna try and convince them that their old man's not such a big yutz.
And he asks Ben what he's gonna do, and Ben says, "Going back's not a question, but going forward, I might have some possibilities." And so they say goodbye, but Clifford says, "Wait, you never told me your name." And Ben yells it out, but they can't hear over the sound of the bus motor. But he says, this is the first time he says, "My name's Ben Reilly." Ben for Uncle Ben, and Reilly for Aunt May's maiden name. And basically this is going to be his new identity going forward.
Yeah, and so this to me is like the midsection of this tale, and I was really enjoying, like, I was feeling Ben's pain. I like this character was like birthed from nothing, and like I had a struggle that I didn't like understand it, because you can't know what this is like, but you feel bad for, you're like, man, what would you do if you woke up and you had like no life? And it was really interesting and cool. And then now we're gonna skip ahead to, what was it, like 3 years later?
Yes.
And now we're gonna get into like way more of a comic book story, where I was like, oh,
really? I thought
I really
when you say comic book story, it is very gritty. This is a very gritty fucking comic. That is a very mischaracterization, Darryl. I'm protesting that right now. This is like
strike it from the record.
This is like Daredevil season 1. You're gonna say Daredevil season 1 is all comic book bullshit?
A little bit. That is a little.
It is, but you act like you can't say comic book bullshit all of it. Like, there's a difference between a very gritty.
It's not. I didn't say all of it was.
But this is a very gritty, down to earth story. There's no costumes involved in the story whatsoever. There's no super villains. It is all just.
But there is villains, and for me, I'm way more interested in what would you do about yourself if, like, you hated yourself, kind of a thing, rather than like, how do you rectify this, along with there's a mob boss controlling.
So how do you not get what makes Kaine so great in the story? Then that's what Kaine's.
That's what I thought too. I'm like, Kaine is great.
I like Kaine.
Kaine said off Mike that if Kaine died, he wouldn't give a shit. So I'm like, fuck you, Darryl. Okay.
No, I said he should have died. We'll get into it.
Kaine should live forever. Marvel keeps trying to kill him off, but fuck Marvel. So, like I said, this is what I mean when I said Romita does really great with great inks. So the inker for this comic is Klaus Janson, and it might seem weird I'm pointing out the inker, but Klaus Janson is one inker that is so famous that he's like the only inker people can name off the top of their head, because Frank Miller's Daredevil, like the Daredevil. Speaking of Daredevil season 1, that's basically based off Frank Miller's Daredevil. But when people talk about his Daredevil, they don't talk about Frank Miller's pencils. They talk about Klaus Jansen's inks, which tells you a lot about how good of an inker he is. That
I could see this. This was actually giving me a lot of Daredevil season 1 vibes. Yeah, a bit like going through it.
So it's like that gritty noir crime drama where like as it starts, it's like it's an interstate in Salt Lake City, crowded traffic. You know, it's like it's very noir style in a good way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it opens with more car accidents as a truck driver has a heart attack while driving on a rainy road. And this time Ben decides, I'm going to save this truck driver, and he manages to grab the wheel, keep him from veering off the road, and pulls the driver out of the car as the truck crashes anyway. And
he saves the car that was going to crash into and gives the guy CPR.
And he's just saying, you're not going to die, you hear me? You're not going to die. So this is already clearly a very different Ben than the last story, where he's now more into...
He's got long hair now. He's got a big jacket.
Yeah, it's one of those where he's like he's found his place as the drifter. Like he even says, like I go from place to place. I'm like a loner, but he's very much about committed to saving people when he like runs across them.
Yeah,
and so
he calls himself the Jack Kerouac of the Clone Saga or something.
So he goes from with his long hair and motorcycle. He drives from place to place, drifting. And so in the narration, this is all past tense. Now, like Darryl suggested in the beginning. And the important thing is that now, this happened later in the actual canonical Clone Saga. The story was released later. And by this point, they had a twist. The Peter we know all along was the clone. Ben was the real Spider-Man. When they fell unconscious during that Jackal fight, they switched spots.
I hated that they told me that this was the real one. Because I would have liked that throughout this, there's two people who don't know exactly they think that they know who's the clone and who's not, but I wish that I didn't know too.
Yes,
but Phil, what if you don't know?
I still don't know really.
And the funny thing is, you still got same sense because they were wrong and they're wrong in the story. It turns out Peter was the real. Like it gets confusing.
Okay.
It gets confusing.
Isn't there 3 clones and Peter's like the real one, and then this story's about 2 clones?
There are 4 named clones, and there's an army of clones that show up for like a 1 story arc. Like you said, if you can make life, why would you just make a million? That's basically what Jekyll does. He just fucks with Peter, saying, "Here's my clones. Fuck you. I can do whatever I want. I can make a million clones." That's essentially what Jekyll does. But
I was trying to look up some things. I'm like, man, because after we end this isn't going to end with Ben Reilly going, "Oh gosh, golly gee, I'm Peter Parker. Better go back to Mary Jane. She sure must missed me."
So that's why I wanted to ease you guys into it. It gets very confusing, and that's the one thing I wish the story was told not in the modern Ben sense, but it doesn't get to the way that much. There's only a few panels where they say like, "Now I know this," but I did it back then, but for the most part, it does not allude to the modern day continuity as much.
Yeah, it's tough because it's only in the narration boxes where it's like, I didn't know I was Peter back then, but I do now. Where it's like the narration is a big part of this too. It definitely does stink reading that, especially if like it's changed canonically later that this isn't actually Peter Parker.
This is still, like Daryl's saying, very narrative focused, and there's 3 narrators throughout this story, and you can tell who they are by the style of the narration boxes. So you have like the clean edges is Ben Reilly, and then we get a new character introduced with like rougher edges.
He's like the full caps lock comic stuff with frayed edges. Yeah, and this is Kaine.
He's got giant shaggy head of hair, big beard and mustache,
and and he is purposely I believe bulkier than Peter.
Yes, and this is he's the guy I was saying that like his art is so good because he's almost cartoonishly like large, but
he's like a man beast.
Yeah, exactly. He does look like the wild man, and it looks good. Like it fits him really well.
Yeah.
And so this is awkward. This had to come into this confusion had to come into play anyway because Kaine's backstory is that Kaine was the first stab at making Ben Reilly, and he was a failure. His body is slowly generating over time. And so Jack was like, "You're worthless."
I have a question. So when this story came out, was Peter Parker? Were they trying to say that Peter Parker was Kaine, or was Kaine a separately?
Kaine was always considered like you're nobody, Kaine. You're just a failed experiment. He was literally what he called Ben in the dream.
Because I was wondering if the clones that switched places when, Peter put him into the smokestack or whatever, if one of them, because I assumed one was Kaine and the other was Ben Reilly.
Wait, there weren't two. There was only one clone.
You're getting into what they actually did in the Clone Saga, where they introduced, that's where Spider Sight comes in. That's not getting to that.
What?
Okay, wait.
Spider
Hold
Sight?
on. I thought Kaine was the original clone from that first thing we read.
No, he got that stuff is all Ben before he got his mind erased and replaced with Peter.
No, but okay. So hold on. What we've read up until this point, I'm not even anything outside of this. What we've read up to this point, there were two Peter Parkers. One was a clone, and they neither knew who was the real clone.
Yeah,
so isn't that Ben Reilly and Kaine? Those two people?
Ben Reilly and Peter.
See, Phil, I thought the exact same thing even when I finished this, and when I was reading through this, I'm like, wait, this wasn't Ben Reilly and Kaine where one of them's the real Peter? Instead, this story is just Ben Reilly and Kaine, two clones fighting each other.
I'm glad you have this confusion, because this is like the Clone Saga getting into this. But
because this is to me, this like kills this story, because I thought it was so cool how there was one real Peter, one clone.
Wait, so counterpoint though. That's what Kaine thinks. So that's why I was going to say it comes into play. They had to bring it up, because that's what Kaine believes. Ben is the real Peter. That's why he But basically, Kaine's thing is he wants to torture Ben, because as far as Kaine knows, Ben is the real Peter. He won't tell Ben he is the real Peter because he wants to torture him, because he stole Kaine's life and Kaine's mind.
But then the problem is, then Ben's like, I didn't know I was actually Peter Parker.
Yeah, because but like Ben doesn't know. That's why Kaine was tormenting him for no reason in Ben's mind. But he was, in Kaine's mind, he knew that supposedly that, man, this is gonna be impossible to understand for viewers. All right, so okay. So here's the timeline. Kaine was created first. He was a failure. Ben was created next. Yep. He's the clone we've been following until now.
Yep.
Then what happens is, during the last years, Kaine started hunting Ben because he thought Ben was the real Peter. And as far as they knew, that was the case. And it turns out later on that was the case.
but
that he was the real Peter?
No.
Wait, who's with Mary Jane?
Peter Parker. So all this is all happening. There's a Peter Parker with Mary Jane. That's the Peter Parker you saw spooning Mary Jane in that rain sequence.
Spooning in the rain.
So I have to explain this then.
Ryan, come back when you need to.
Okay, so this story came out.
Wait, even if this is true that Kaine came first and was a failure, none of this is in the story. So when you're reading this, it doesn't make sense to me, because
because like Phil, I thought this was just about the first two clones from that fight before, and it's a twist reveal where Ben Reilly is the real
I didn't
Peter
think there were two
Parker,
clones.
and that this was the clone out of the vat.
Right, I thought there was one clone, one Peter. These are the two people in the story that they're fighting each other. Neither knows who's the real Peter, but Ben thinks it's not him. Kaine thinks it's Ben, but neither is sure. And I'm like, that's interesting, because they both don't know who the real Peter Parker is.
They don't though. They really don't.
But the narrator knows.
No, but he doesn't though. That's the funny thing. He doesn't know.
Oh, he thinks he knows, but it's a lie.
Oh my god.
Too.
It's really
being lied through narration.
This is stuff I gloss over. What I care about is the stuff you were talking before, where what would you do if you're the clone? What would you do if you thought you were a clone? That's what I find interesting about this tale. And getting into the actual canon, that's where people say the story is completely irredeemable shit. And I think that's not fair to the actual good writing going on here.
Yeah.
I don't think the writing is good. I don't think it's irredeemable. And it's very interesting. It's just like, if you just removed any instances in which Ben thought he was Peter Parker, I think this would be a pretty swell story. Because it doesn't even come up, he doesn't experience any time throughout the story where he's like, what if I am Peter Parker? It's just like the narration keeps clogging it up occasionally.
It's because these are having time. Basically, you bought this because you're reading Spider-Man at a time and you want to learn more about
and you're expecting it's like, oh, this is actual Peter Parker.
Yeah, so to clean things up for our audience, the canon while it was happening, Ben Ben still thinks he's a clone.
Okay, and Kaine thinks that Ben is the real Peter Parker and that he's the clone. That Kaine thinks Kaine is the clone, and that Ben is the real Peter Parker. And he's been hunting him for the past 3 years. and he doesn't say he's going to torture him until the end of this. He's like, I've just been following him, and
I had assumed that he's just like, I have to tell Peter Parker that he is Peter Parker, or I have to tell Ben that you're Spider-Man.
But he says like he knows the truth, but he doesn't want to. A part of him wants Ben to suffer. He doesn't want him to know the truth.
I assumed it was the same part of him where it's just like Ben Reilly is like a part of me wants.
Well, that is important. That's important. That's one point because this is the transition from Kaine basically hits the same point that Ben hit, where he wants to be a bad person, but he wants to be a good person too, and that's where the story comes into play. So, Kaine, this bear man, is in a diner. And a prostitute comes up to him saying, hey, you want to have a good time? And Kaine just ignores her, so her pimp is like, yo, you think you're too good for my girl? And Kaine just slams the guy's head into the bar table and just throws him away. And he gives the woman some free change before walking out.
And this is where he meets another lady who says, what's your name? And he's like, I don't have a name. I was never born, but you can call me Kaine.
Yeah, so this is...
And this is also why I thought it was just like the two of them, because I was like, oh, Kaine and the real Peter Parker is Abel, and he's like, I'm gonna go kill you, brother.
That is basically what Kaine thinks he's doing, so... So, the woman he met was Louise Kennedy, and she's meeting with a guy called Jimmy the Mouth, and she punches him in the stomach as she grabs Kennedy's arm. And it cuts to her later with her partner, Detective Raven, who's this older guy.
This, if you remember, we said that there's 3 narrators. This is our 3rd narrator. He's in like blue rounded text box.
So they're both cops, and she's with Jimmy the Mouth as a mobster, and she's undercover in that organization, working with Detective Raven on the case to try to bring down the mob.
Yeah, and so but Detective Raven can tell like she was really smitten with Kaine because she's just thinking about him instead of trying to talk to him. So it cuts to the
jail.
It cuts to the jail where the main mob boss
Tannen,
mob boss Tannen is, and basically he starts smack talking
it's just basically, it's like you have a corrupt guard here, and he's like, good, like make this person suffer outside of prison. I want him to suffer. Yes. So it's the mob boss is still running things from inside the bars.
He tells the guard that he wants somebody to suffer for what he did to him, and then it cuts to Ben. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ben gets a job at the local university as a teacher, a TA at the science department, and he forges like his resume and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I worked with this guy, and I went here. And this is again in his narration. He's like, I didn't do any of this because I'm a clone of Peter Parker. So when everything
you've ever believed about yourself turns out to be a lie, how can the truth possibly matter? So like it doesn't matter, and if once he gets found out, whatever, like he'll just drive out of here and go find it.
He still feels Uncle Ben saying like how important honesty is, and he feels bad about it. But he's like Darryl said, he's like, I need some money for my next travel, and then I'll move on. So he applies for this job, he gets the job, and then at a diner he meets a redhead. Janine. Yep. Who looks like Mary Jane.
Yeah.
Which was the interesting thing where Sly was like, Gwen Stacy's always the one she loved. Because as soon as this came up and it's Janine, I was like, oh my God, just Mary Jane 2.0 over here.
She actually bears a lot of resemblances to Mary Jane. It is funny that you pointed out.
Mary Janine.
So Janine and him basically hit it off immediately. So they started chatting for like an hour about
important, the cop is here too.
Raven shows up to interrupt the conversation, and as soon as she shows up, Janine starts acting clearly scared, and Ben notices this.
And Ben's like weirded out because he's like, I'm a good judge of character, and the cop seems like a good guy. He seems like a really decent guy, but for some reason...
Reminds me of Uncle Ben specifically. He says, like, reminds me of Uncle Ben.
Yeah. And he's like, but for some reason, Janine's on edge around him, which is weird. And so I thought this was interesting, because I'm like, well, that is a pretty weird thing. Yeah. Like, I'm like, what is going on here? But
he asked Janine, like, well, does that guy scare you? And he's like, no, it doesn't scare me. And then Ben's like, okay, then I must have read it wrong. She's like, yeah, I guess you did. But Ben's like...
Want to go out?
Yeah, and...
yeah, I'm new in town. I know it's lame, but I swear it's true. And she's like, I don't think so. And he goes, okay, no big deal. And then from behind him, she goes, yes. He's like, yeah? And she's like, yes.
And he goes like, yes!
Yeah, I like that little touch.
And one thing I like about the story is they mix the narrators. So the narration box now says, well, what was it that drew me to her? But now it's Kaine talking because he's thinking about... He's falling in love with
Louise.
Louise, yes.
The cop that's undercover.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing too, is like, at least speaking to the strength of this story here, is that it's not something you can just like breeze by real quickly and not pay attention to anything. It's like you have to be cognizant of what's going on, especially like we have like Ben here, the clone, and Kaine here, the clone, and they both like girls, and then there's an undercover like mob story going on in this small town to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of players and acts. It felt very much like a play or something.
What I also liked, too, is that it is Salt Lake City, and Peter, or Ben, talks about the fact that it's like an alternate version of New York where people still have, like, a lot of, like, hope and naivete and stuff, where he's like, in this city in particular, it has the hustle and bustle, but people here, like, believe, they have more faith, and that he's, like, drawn to that, and he finds, like, he feels like he's at home, like, a second home here, which I thought was really interesting, too, as, like, a setting for this place, because I don't think I've read stuff in Salt Lake City as a setting before. It's always like it's New York or Chicago or something.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting setting. And you do need to pay attention because like there's a lot of double crossing going on too. Here we have.
Speaking of which, so Luis blows her cover during a drug operation, and pulls out her gun on the guy she's dealing with. She thinks it's one guy, but it turns out he brought his friends, and they pull their guns on her, and then Kaine jumps through the window. Yeah.
And again,
and here's where we get like him being like the big bear man, just slamming people's heads into the ground, and his hands are as big as their heads.
I was just gonna say his hands are literally bigger than their heads. Like he looks like so out of proportion to everyone else, but it really fits him. I think like he does look like a bear man, and he smashes their heads. And Louise said. She told me she wasn't afraid of me. She told me she wasn't even surprised I was there. She felt the same obsession, compulsion, burning inside of her, burning. She says, "So, now what?" And he goes, "I can think of a few things." And then they bone. But we
cut away from the boning to cut to Detective Raven missing a bus. And so he's just thinking about like now he has to go walk home to his family.
And he also points out here that he always misses the bus by just a few seconds, and he's like, God wants me to move around so that I don't get fat. Because he's a devout Mormon, too. And that comes up a lot, too, because he's like, I guess it's God's plan that I ate too many donuts, I need to move.
That this happens to
me. He says God's plan that he misses the bus because that's why he wasn't home that night. Because what happens is, that boss, I forgot his name.
Tannen's goons
grab him, and they come in the car, grab him, put him in the car. Meanwhile, Ben is driving on a motorcycle, is driving near the same area. His Spidey sense starts going crazy, so he starts running into a nearby house where the sense is leading him, and the house explodes. And later turns out this is Detective Raven's house and Detective Raven's family inside his house. And Ben runs in and saves the wife and son from the rubble.
Yeah,
and pulls them out.
Yeah.
And he says he was at times about how he felt the acceleration and he felt like Spider-Man again, saving those two people. And we cut to Luis and Kaine post coitus. She gets the news that
this is also here. This is what I mentioned about the burns. You can see that Kaine's really burned on one side of his body.
That's the cellular degeneration.
It's his face is burned. Here it's like he's got these weird like veiny dark red or like pink.
But I thought when you said the smokestack thing, I'm like, oh, these are his smokestack burns. But
no.
Yeah, they don't mention the cellular degeneration until later.
Yeah, so Kaine, because he's a failed clone, he's slowly going to die eventually, a very young death. He's like Solid Snake and Metal Gear Solid. So Fox died.
Just Slide's brain working overtime, being like, Fox.
No, it was really a half-ass reference to Fox die at the end of Metal Gear Solid 1.
Died. Good old Liquid.
And so Luis is shaken up about this, and she says that they're both in the hospital. They don't know if they're going to pull through. And she tells Kaine, hold me, and don't ever let go. And Kaine's narration says, never. Believe it or not, Luis, I'm still holding you, even today, even after what I did, holding tight.
And again, so interesting to me because I'm like, what happens? I just found this whole story really interesting.
So it cuts to that the son and wife in the hospital. Ben is inspecting them, but he's like saying, "No, this is the end of my involvement. I'll let the cops and Detective Raven take care from now on. They can take care of themselves." And it cuts to Detective Raven with a gun to his head and bound and gagged. All right, so now this is issue 2.
Basically starts out with Ben talking, like I said before, about how Salt Lake City's a cool city. He fell in love with it. Streets were clean. People had a smile and kind word for each other. The world was pregnant with hope. Hope was a precious commodity for me. And then we go to the car where they're beating up Raven, the detective. And in the middle,
pistol whipping him.
In the middle of the road, we see Ben Reilly. Again, this is why Sly said it's like Daredevil, because he's not wearing a costume. He just like has like rags on his face.
Yeah.
And he basically busts through the car, saves Detective Raven.
It's like a serious version of that scene Deadpool when Deadpool breaks up the car.
Yeah.
And he pulls out the detective, and then he's just beating the shit out of the rest of these guys. And then he tells the detective after he saves him, it's like, you got nothing to fear from me. And the detective says, in that instant I heard his voice, I knew I didn't.
Yeah, and so then Louise shows up with the police, and she
the undercover
she
cop
tells because she's part of the Raven, and tells him that your son and boy, they're in the hospital, and so Ben,
your wife and your son and your boy.
What'd I say?
Your son and your boy.
your son and your
and he
boy.
says, and Ben says, like, he again going back to the power and responsibility thing. He's like, whether I like it or not, I'm addicted, kind of, to like fighting.
I was so hooked on Spider-Man's power. That's what it always comes down to, doesn't it? Yeah. And Kaine's watching him. I almost cried out for him to stop. Riley, I wanted to say, let's kill the past, destroy the future, stand face to face as friends in the now. And this is where I was like, I didn't feel like he wanted to kill him. He's just like watching him not knowing how to approach him.
But he says it's because Louis Kennedy's making him change his ways. He says like,
but even earlier he says a part of me wanted. He's
struggling. He's struggling.
I think as he starts degrading, he starts going crazy, which makes sense.
He does. He does get darker, but he's struggling between the good side and the bad side here. Like, because he could just tell Ben, "Hey, you're Peter Parker. You shouldn't. Don't feel bad about yourself." And then be like, "Yeah, we're brothers," and they'll live a happy life together. But he doesn't, because part of him is succumbing to what he keeps calling the darkness. But he sees Louise as a light in the darkness, and he thinks she's changing him.
Yeah. So we go back to
and what was
we also get?
Sorry, real quick. And the degradation, by the way, it shows up here. He started basically. We don't know it's degradation yet. I'm explaining it now, but he's getting all these pains, and he says like, "I lived this pain my entire life." And
I see, when this happened, I knew it was because of like the clone stuff. Because it's one of the things I was wondering. It's like, how do you 100% know you're a clone? And it's like, if your body starts falling apart because you weren't meant to last, I was like, that's a probably telltale sign of that.
All right, sorry, go ahead, Phil.
No, I was actually going to bring that up too when I saw it. That like it is. They don't say it yet, but it's like it is again that not common, but like you see this in fiction sometimes where you have like the Frankenstein monster or the whatever that's meant. It's life was created where it wasn't meant to be, and they're not going to get a full life.
Yeah.
So we go back to the prison, and he's like,
the guard
tells him.
The guard basically tells Tannen that we got the boy and the son, also the wife.
The wife died, but the son survived.
And it's a small interaction too, but I like that the guard, like, in order to talk to Tannen, he starts like shit talking him, where he's like, "You're reading a magazine like some woman," and so Tannen starts yelling. I was like, "Don't talk to me like that, scum!" And as he goes to like grab the guard, that's when they start whispering these things to each other. I'm like, oh, that's much smarter than just like a guard coming up and being like, "Hello, Mr. Mob Boss, here's your report."
And then so they're at the funeral of the wife.
Raven and Louise are at the funeral now.
And
I don't think it's the funeral.
It's just a church, but the church is empty.
Right.
But Raven is now mourning his wife, and Louise comforts him, puts her hand on his hand. But when she shows up, he walks away, and
he says that he was mad at God.
Yeah,
himself.
He wasn't mad at Tan. He wasn't mad at himself. He was mad at God now, and that's the struggle Raven goes through. But like he's trying to find hope in this very grim and gritty world. Where there's now God is like seems to be spiting him, giving him more shit than he can deal with.
Ben Reilly meets up with Janine.
Well, first he goes to college, and
he teaches. He's like, it might be possible to create life. It's like, fucking know it is.
Yeah, and then he sees Janine at the school, and he remembers, oh shit, when I was saving that fucking kid and the wife, I blew up Janine. And he's like, oh, hey Janine, I forgot that I had an emergency and I didn't have your phone number. Look, that sounds like a name it probably is. Do you think we could go for dinner tonight? And she's like, no, we're going for lunch right now. And she grabs his arm and they go to lunch together, which I thought was a cute interaction.
Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah.
But then they have this weak thing. Part of me like wasn't super, especially because I thought that because this was the real Peter Parker, I'm like, Janine's not gonna fucking last if she's not like actual Peter, like she's not actually Mary Jane or something with like a mind or memory.
She's a clone of Mary Jane.
No, but even then, if this is the real Peter Parker, he wouldn't be with her. But as they're going out, like they hang out with like a week, just being pals and slowly like falling in love with each other, more or less. And at night, he puts on the mask and he's trying to find out Tannen's like his plot and plan.
It's like
you know, he busts up like
all
drug
these
rings.
montages where it's like they press.
This is what I was saying about like comic booky kind of stuff, where it's like, and then at night I do comic.
This is like one page. This is literally one page entire fucking comic.
Yeah.
Most of it is based on the fucking drama, and you focus on one page, think, wow, the whole comic book bullshit now. All that drama of Kaine and Ben, it's all gone. It's just comic book drama now.
And even the bottom of this page is a nice scene where Luis and Kaine are watching the stars above the city, and Kaine basically says, "Look at the stars, the great flaming lights fighting against the darkness of the sky. That's you, my light in the darkness." And she's like, "I don't know. I think my light died a long time ago." And he's like, "No, we're both scarred. That's why we're together."
No, but wait. First, she tries to pull back his hair, revealing that what looks like his burned face was actually his generation going on. And Kaine says no, but Luis insists, saying, "We've got nothing to hide from each other. We're both scarred. That's why we're together, isn't it? Because we know we're the same." And Kaine's like, "No, we're not the same. You have no idea who I am." And Luis says, "Yes, I do. You're the night sky. You're the darkness, and that's why I love you." And Kaine says, like, that was one night.
Nice scene.
Yeah, that was one night that he was happy. He remembers being happy.
Yeah. Then we see back at the hospital, the detective Raven doesn't even go see his son because he can't face him after the wife dying. Like, how do you tell your kid like your mom's dead? Which I think is really sad, like a really heartbreaking thought.
And then some mobster takes the kid,
and again,
in the middle of the
very artfully done, because we've seen this guy with that ring before, and there's a silhouette of the guy putting it, like grabbing the kid with just that ring glowing, which I thought was a cool sight, or whatever.
Yeah. So then Ben goes to Janine's apartment, but Janine's like making out, but Janine pushes him away, saying no.
I can't. This has to stop. Bye. And so she's hiding something. And you're like, what is she hiding? What,
And like Ben looks sad outside the door, but on the other side of the door, Janine is crying on the opposite end, and the caption just says, "The shadow of the past." Ben's narration.
Meanwhile, Kaine and Luis are boning down again, and
then Kaine goes no,
and
and it's the degeneration going on, and it starts making him like freak out.
He jumps out the window
and punch the ground. Yeah,
and this is where you start to see him really degenerate. Like, his skin is like boils all over it now, and he jumps out the window, going, "Make it stop!" And now this scene is just crazy to me. There's an exchange going on with all the mobsters, and Ben shows up to bust it up.
Yes.
And starts beating them up. And then Kaine shows up to be like, "Reilly!" And he looks really cool. I like the art a lot. And he's like, his narration says, "Professor Warren told me I would degenerate, my flesh would split and canker, and now that it finally happened, I needed a receptacle for that pain." And he just starts slamming fucking Ben Reilly. "Someone to suffer with me, burn with me. I needed Reilly. I knew who he truly was, even if he didn't. Not a clone like me, but a man. It was then, I think, that our war truly began."
It was then I realized how much I loathed him, as he slams a box down on top of him. And he says killing him would be too easy, so he vowed the rest of his days to tormenting him, denying him happiness, which is what Sly was saying. Because now it seems like he's just like, "I'm just going to torture you because as I'm dying, I'd rather not you live because I'm based off of you, so I want you to die with me."
Yeah, fuck you for getting to live a life while I...
But... So because of that, before he kills him, he just leaves him beaten on the ground, and then the mobsters come back in. They're like, "All right, I guess we got this masked.
I guess we'll shoot him in the fucking head." But then
Luis shows up and puts a gun to that guy's head, and they're like,
she says, "You're not gonna kill him. I am." And she puts a gun to Ben's head, saying, "I think you'd like that, wouldn't you, Mr. Tannen?" As Mr. Tannen shows up holding Raven's son hostage. So
how do you get out of prison?
So the craziest thing about this scene to me is that Kaine jumps out the window while they're boning, and she just puts on her coat and comes to this drug deal. Like I guess that's life.
Yeah.
And she misses Kaine by like 5 seconds.
I assumed there was more of a time difference between those two.
Okay, maybe.
I mean, it's we have a frame of Kaine running away, and then 2 frames later, Luis is there.
It's possible that there's a time. It's just it didn't feel like it to me. I'm like, what? Like
I definitely think like this was like DeMatteis was trying to stretch this idea to fit when it's like it's very like it would have made almost more sense for Kaine to be alone, freak out, and come do this. And even then, I was like, it's just weird that like all he wants to do is beat him up and then run away and leave him to mobsters.
No, because he decides like he just went to Reilly to beat the shit out of him, and then he decides to.
Yeah, but then he was just about to be shot in the head by mobsters. It's like so much for tormenting him.
Well, he
actually was watching to do something about it.
Yeah, he was. It's just that later he's watching the situation to make sure no one's actually killing Ben.
And then as he's watching, he says he gets shocked because as he watches through that glass in horror, he says the pain I felt was not because of the pain that was exploding through my nerve endings, not because I'm degenerating, turning me into a hideous caricature of a man. No, those things I could endure, or at least I could learn to. But the sight of Luis Kennedy pointing a gun at Ben Reilly's head while mob boss Tannen and his sycophant nephew looked on, that was too much.
And now this is issue 3.
And so it's revealed that like Luis is a double agent kind of. So she's undercover, but she's actually working with the mob for real.
Yes.
And
she's in too deep.
Yeah. And they're about to execute Ben Reilly, and she's like, "Can we not do this in front of the boy?" Like, she has some humanity.
But Tannen's like, "Fuck off, do it anyway." And she's like, "Okay, sure." But then that's when.
Well, they take the boy out, and he's just like, "We're just gonna kill the boy later." And she's like, "He doesn't need to see this." And then he's like, "Don't argue with me." She points the gun to his head and says, "Yes, sir." And she's about to fire at him.
What I like too is that Ben Kaine in the narration here says, "This still could be her undercover." Like. The whole thing could have been a setup, but there was something in her voice, in her eyes, a hunger, a bloodlust that I knew all too well. And that's when he's like, no, she's really... And then you get this page of... This is so great. The glass shattering, you see all of their shocked faces, like small panels of all of them, and the giant words, Louise! And it's just Kaine busting through the glass of the like warehouse windows, and he's just like this... Mm-hmm. Giant, his hair is everywhere. His eyes are just white at this point. Bear man jumping through the window saying, I thought she had wrestled with her demons and won, channeled her pain into a life of service to the law. I thought she was my hope. When I held Luis in my arms, I was clinging to my own salvation. But that night, I realized with utter finality what a fool I'd been. Hope and salvation were illusions, and love was the biggest lie of all. And he walks forward just like, you betrayed me.
Yeah, everyone's scattering at this point, and Luis is like, what happened to you, Kaine? And Ben tries to save Luis.
And he
throws a box onto Kaine's head.
And he's like, I don't even know why I'm trying to save him.
Yeah, Ben says, like, the ironic thing is Luis trying to kill me, and Kaine just saved me. But now I'm trying to stop Kaine from killing Luis. I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with me? And he says, I don't know, but in some crazy way, I think I was trying to save him.
Yeah, because he's like, if he kills Luis Kennedy, he'd be killing a part of himself, the best part, and there'd be no turning back after that. Which I thought was also really touching, like that he's like trying to save him from himself, kind of here.
And this is why I say, like, they bring up, like, they say, didn't know Kaine was my imperfect clone of Sight Animation, but he says, I didn't care, I didn't know that, I didn't care at the time. All I knew was that he was a man in pain, and that against all logic, I wanted to help him. But he says he couldn't do it with Matthew Raven in danger, the son. So he goes out to. He basically knocks down Kaine temporarily and goes to save the boy from.
Yep, he does. Yeah, so he saves the boy and says, "I'm going to save you. I swear to God, I won't hurt you." He brings the son back to Detective Raven.
Like through the window, Detective Raven looked through the window, and all of a sudden, Ben's holding the son outside the window.
Yeah, also great, really great art, and just. Like paneling is good,
and so then he asks about Raven asks about his partner. Oh, how's Luis Kennedy? Is she okay? And Ben can't bring himself to tell the truth about his partner, so he just says, "Oh, she's fine," and goes out into the stormy night.
Yep.
Yeah, it says after all that he's been through, after all he had lost, I just couldn't do it. Tell him. Then he returns to Janine, all broken and beat up because he has no other place to go. And so then he collapses in her arms as she's holding him and he's passing out. She says, "Don't worry, sweet, rest now, sweet man, rest. I promise you, I won't leave."
Just says, "Oh, she's fine," and goes out into the stormy night.
Yep.
Yeah, it says after all that he's been through, after all he had lost, I just couldn't do it. Tell him. Then he returns to Janine, all broken and beat up because he has no other place to go. And so then he collapses in her arms as she's holding him and he's passing out. She says, "Don't worry, sweet, rest now, sweet man, rest. I promise you I won't leave."
Yes.
And when he wakes up, this is when she's like, "I have my bags packed and I'm planning to leave." And he's like, "You're leaving just when we were getting to know each other?"
And he's afraid to tell her about himself because he's like, if she finds out that Ben Reilly's a wall-crawling freak, worse, the clone of a wall-crawling freak, she'd walk out and never come back. And then she's like, "I am a monster myself, not you."
Yeah, and it cuts back to Louise. She's with, look at what we thought was Mr. Tannen, but it was actually Mr. Tannen's brother who was actually a businessman.
This part was too confusing to me, where they're like, they were going to get Jimmy the mouth to do it and then arrest him to get him off on a technicality, but Jimmy couldn't do it, so Duke did it.
It was doing it was trying to explain why Louise double crossed that one guy that was back there, why she blew her. Because she's been working with the mob the whole time, so why would she point a gun at him? It's because it's they didn't update that guy on everything that was going on.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's convoluted. It is definitely confusing because it's trying to really defend how Louise wasn't a double agent before or a triple agent, but now she is.
But wasn't that a cover for her? Isn't it that she was the one who set the bomb on the Raven's house?
Yeah, but the point is that what Darryl's saying is that when she pulled the gun on him before, the plan was to let himself get arrested and then she would get him off on a technicality. But he didn't know that was the plan, so that's why he had those other two guys with the guns that were going to kill her until Kaine busted through the window.
But but in case you were like, oh, is Louise redeemable? She set the bomb to kill Detective Raven's wife and child, so she is a monster. Full-on monster.
Yeah, so she's a villain.
Yeah.
And so this guy here, Tannen's brother, who's been pretending to be Tannen this whole time, pulls out a gun and he's like, I'm done with this.
He blames Louise for everything going wrong. It's supposed to go clean and you fucked it up. Now I'm going to kill you. But before he can do that, Kaine comes out and snaps his neck.
Again, these gigantic arms from the shadows and one glowing white eye just come out and just surround this guy. Gun falls out of his hand, snaps his neck. And he's like...
And he says, too, Kaine's like, "She was lying to me from the start, and I embraced her lies, held tight to them, like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. Oh, yes, I was quite the hero, rescued the damsel in distress. And that night I intended to rescue her one last time, which is why he rescues her instead of killing her here. But then he says, so I could have the pleasure of killing her myself."
But then she's like, "Please don't make me shoot you, Kaine." She takes out her gun, and she's, "Don't make me shoot you. Whatever's wrong, whatever happened to you, we can't change what we shared. We can't change the fact that I love you." And Kaine breaks down saying, when she spoke those words that no ever living soul has ever said to me, my rage just melted. For the first time in my brief life, I wept. And
then it cuts to Janine weeping, saying to Ben now, "I've never told anyone this before, but I'm a murderer. When I was younger, my father..." It cuts back to her father sexually abusing her, I think is the implication here.
Yes, absolutely. There's no subtlety to that. But, yeah, it says she had tried to move away, got a job, but she'd slowly started to remember because she had repressed what she did, that she shot him.
Yeah, she tried to move away, but the rage she kept remembering what happened. The rage built up inside her. She came back and murdered her father,
and so she ran. She's been running ever since, and she's like, "How don't you?"
He's also embracing her. He's embracing her, and she's like, "How can you hold me like this? Don't you hate me? Don't I disgust you?" And Ben says, "I love you," and she says, How can you possibly love someone like me?" And Ben says, "Funny, I could ask you the same thing."
And that's when he tells her, "I'm the clone of Spider-Man. Yeah. Let me show you."
And he doesn't say that. He just says, that's when I told her the truth, basically.
Yeah. But then he climbs on walls with her to show.
Yeah, and she's like, "Wow." Yeah. And then it's Kaine is pretty much crying on the ground. Louise is like, "Don't you understand? How could you ally yourself with Tannen?" And she's like, "The Tannens of this world, they are the darkness. And in the end, the darkness always wins." She did say she loved the darkness.
Yeah. And she's like, "Why surrender to it?"
Yeah. Why fight when you can surrender to it, glory in it? And he says, "But you were my only hope." And she says, "In an odd way, you were mine too."
And so she leaves. And then we cut to fucking Detective Raven, who's on the case of Janine. He's like, I figured it out. Janine is Elizabeth, the murderer. And, she seems like a kind person, but the trial will decide.
Yeah, the law's the law. You got to bring her in for murder.
She's gone the law. The only things we can depend on in the world where people aren't always what they seem. As Louis shows up and asks him how he's doing.
Yeah, how's it going? And he's like, we caught the Jimmy the Mouth. And she's like,
my good old reliable partner.
Yeah. She's like, did he have anything interesting to say? And he's like, no, I'm going to go arrest Janine real quick, though. And she's like, I'll come with you. So now we have like a complete intersection of all the characters here.
Yeah, and Raven says in his narration, looking back, I don't understand why she came. If she was a villain the papers made her out to be, she should have run. But that's the thing about people, not always what they seem. As Peter is...
It's about Janine.
Ben is jumping from rooftop to rooftop with Janine in tow. And...
Yep, and Ben's thinking that he's just waiting for her to feel like that he's a hideous freak, a crime against nature. And so she's like, hey, Spider-Man, why are you standing there like a jerk? And he's like, what? And she's like, I love you, Ben Reilly, whoever you are. And he's like, I guess I wasn't much of a mind reader.
Kaine's watching like,
Kaine's watching.
And he says, how do he
stripped us of identity, years on the run, living like the shadow of a man, and still he found happiness, found love.
My cells burned.
My heart was torn to shreds. I am nothing but cold rage and blind hatred. Professor Warren would have been proud. At long last, his son was reaching his full potential.
So now we have this like climax scene here is Janine and Ben are getting bus tickets to like basically just leave Salt Lake City.
The meeting with the diner.
They're getting some burgers to go. You're right, before they leave.
Yeah, so
that's when
they're going. They go to the diner. The detectives go to the diner to intercept them, saying it's time to stop running. But then Louise realizes that she's with Ben Reilly, the guy who's busting the operations the whole entire time. She takes out her gun
because now Ben Reilly can blow her cover.
Yeah,
working like as a
that she is actually like working for Tanner.
Yeah, and so she claims that he is one of the mobsters, and she pulls a gun on him, saying like oh shit, like I have to basically eliminate him so he doesn't blow my cover.
He knocks a gun out of her hand, and then he grabs the Raven, the detective, up, and he says, "Leave us alone," and he drops him down. He says, "We headed for the mountains," and as they're driving away to be together. Kaine just jumps on the mountain.
Mid motorcycle ride, and he's just like, "I'm gonna kill you, Riley." And Riley says, "Sorry, Kaine, but the first time in 3 long years, I've got someone to live for." And basically,
and then Luis and Raven are showing up as this is going on.
Yeah,
and then they see them fighting,
Ben and Kaine fighting.
He also said so. Raven in his narration here says. I think I actually did realize the truth when she pulled her gun in the diner. All those little details I've been consciously pushing away came together. Like I started to realize my partner and best friend betrayed me.
Everything she once believed in, but I still refuse to believe that she betrayed me. Right. Which I think is a really great touch. Like,
I do too.
Like what we have is important enough that she wouldn't betray me of all people. But
she betrayed the law, but not like her friend.
Yeah. And so then she pulls a gun. Ben knocks down Kaine. And then Louis shows up with a gun, saying, "You're dead" to Ben. And Kaine's inner monologue said, "That's when I saw her, and my blood froze, because I knew in that awful moment that I could really do it, that I would do it. And the pain and the shame and the horrible joy of it would haunt me, torment me, for the rest of my wretched life," as he grabs her neck and snaps it. And
goes, "Ah!"
Yeah. And then Ben narration as Louis's body thumps to the ground. Ben says, "Janine told me that Kaine grabbed Kennedy's gun then, started to squeeze the trigger. What's he gonna do?" she wondered. "Kill her again?" He was so for a gun, I don't think even he knew. But as I came to, something lit up in his eyes, some dark inspiration. And that was the first time I ever saw the horrible, disfiguring burn that they called the mark of Kaine. And
the mark of
So what Kaine does is, how Spider-Man sticks to walls? He sticks to a person's face and rips off the flesh off their face in a hand gesture. Wow. And so he basically, how Spider-Man sticks to walls?
Yes.
It's like if I put sticky fingers on your face and ripped off part of your face.
Yeah, and so this was a mystery going on in the comics. Basically, Kaine kept killing people, and the only sign they'll leave was this handprint, and it was called the Mark of Kaine. And
so when I saw that Mark of Kaine thing, that's when I was like, oh, this guy, because I thought his cell's deteriorating. Yeah. I thought he was going to die soon, but then they're like, this is the Mark of Kaine. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a thing, or this is a thing, I guess.
Well, the reason why the story exists is to explain a lot of what's happening in the modern comics.
Yeah.
This is so what happens is Kaine basically put his fingerprints all over Lewis's face, right? So in the modern comics right now, as this is happening, Detective Raven shows up and he's like, Peter Parker, I have your DNA on file, and he arrests the Peter Parker we all know and love. And so basically it's an airtight case, because what are the chances you have a clone of yourself with exactly the same DNA? So
in this universe, very high.
I know, but they're not a super, like, you have to keep in mind, back then, like, it was always like,
that's true, they didn't know he was Spider-Man. They could have just been some transforming.
Yeah, well, who would clone Peter Parker? This fucking lame photographer Daily Bugle. So like,
who would clone Peter Parker?
So Detective Raven's like, yes, I finally got the man who killed my partner. And just to explain how he killed, the story is to explain how Kaine killed Detective Raven, Detective Kennedy, Louis Kennedy, who Detective Raven is, and what the mark of Kaine, like, how it originated. And he did it because, and how Kaine even started killing people in the first place, basically. And so, speaking of Detective Raven, he shows up, threatening to arrest Ben Reilly, and Ben Reilly is just like, I know you've been through a rough freak, but me, remember, I've been through a lot too. I remember that if I was a killer, you'd be dead right now. He knocks Detective Raven unconscious.
He's like, yeah, that ain't me. I'm not being arrested. See ya.
Yeah, so
and
he says here the fingerprint. Ben's narration says the fingerprints Kaine left on Louis Kennedy's gun come back to haunt me 2 years later. But that day we weren't thinking about the future. We were just holding tight to another, holding out tight to love. The truth is, it's the only thing in life worth holding on to. As we cut to Kaine at Louise's grave. I think Jack Craven will agree with me. Yep. Even in the midst of the most incomprehensible tragedies, simple human love is a blessing, a miracle. As it cuts to Detective Raven with his son fishing. During difficult months that followed, Janine showed me how to live that miracle. In the end, we couldn't hold on to it. In the end, I lost her. But I'll treasure the miracle we shared, cling to her, till the day I die. As they ride off into the sunset.
The end.
Wow.
So, Darryl, you didn't like this?
So, I the first half of it, like all the clone stuff and him getting the identity of Ben Reilly was among my favorite things we've read this year, including, like, 52. Like, I'd say it's like was on par with, like, the really best moments from that. And then once I got to this story, I feel like there was just a lot of actors going on. It was less of stuff that I was interested in. And also, like, I was, like, fine with Kaine in this story. For me, it's just, like, it doesn't make sense to have deteriorating cells and somehow you go on living for so many years after this.
Kaine's superhero costume, like his supervillain costume, is a suit to prevent his deterioration. So he has to wear a suit at all times to prevent his deterioration.
Okay.
I really liked this, too. I mean, you said you liked the first half and then this part less.
Yeah,
I liked
considerably less.
I liked it all a lot, and I said to you guys earlier, like, I was reading this, like, on my phone, hungover in bed, like, feeling sick, but none of that. Sometimes, you know, your mood can tinge the way you read things. I loved this, no matter how bad I was feeling. I'm like, this is so fucking good. Like, I really liked the clone stuff early on. I liked Kaine's struggle a lot through this, and how he, like, fell into this rage. There were parts of it that did annoy me, like the fact that they're like, I didn't know that I was a clone, or even the mark of Kaine. Like when they brought that up, I'm like, again, it's because it's a continuing story. But for me, I'm like, this would have been nice if it was self-contained and didn't have that.
Yeah. Well, he says it's the first time he ever did. I wish they showed you what he was doing to her. They just show the mark on her face, and they don't explain how he did it to her.
Yeah.
But even then, if they did show it, it's like, it gives you the feeling, it's like, oh, there's more to this story, rather than just like, he killed the woman he loved. It's like, look at this cool thing he does to his
No, you have to keep in mind, no one would read this if they weren't a Spider-Man fan in the first place. Like, you'd be following the story.
I'm not a Spider-Man fan, I read it.
I know, but that's because I fucking knew about it. No one knows this comic exists except for me, pretty much.
I also also thought that the last few scenes in the Salt Lake City arc were like, they felt very, like, jammed together and rushed, like, every time that all the characters were just there, like, oh, okay, he jumps off him while he's on the motorcycle, and then the cops are right there at the same time as well. Like, it felt like time sped up to have them all meet real quick twice in a row. But
that was the thing, is it wasn't just like they met up all together once. It just felt like they kept
because they're chasing
each other. Like how he knocks them out at the diner. It's like it makes sense for them to chase, but like I would have just had the end at the diner and have Kaine come in there rather than like leave us alone, and then they drive away and then they come up again, and then he has to knock out Raven again and go leave us alone. I completely
disagree. I think that one, that's like the second one was redundant. But I think the Detective Raven could have, like maybe Louis should have knocked him out or something and skipped that scene because they got the point already. But I think it makes perfect sense. They were chasing after them. They would have gone back into their car and chase after them because that's kind of the guy the Raven is. He's gonna fucking try to follow the law. We've very established that. He's fucking the brother from Bleach, basically. Gotta follow the law. and that's why I was gonna say, I think Lost Year, I like the first half. I think Lost Years is better because I disagree completely. I think the writing is incredibly tight in these 3 issues. For 3 issues to tell a story with this much, these main characters, they all tie into one narrative at the same point, and there are a few points, like you pointed out a few good points about this part seems sped up and too convenient, but for the most part, for 3 issues, this is the kind of storytelling I fucking love, where in 3 issues you tell a very condensed, impactful story from multiple characters. There's not a singular main character in the story. It's basically Kaine and Ben and Detective Raven all trying to find hope in the dark world. And I think the story in 3 issues to deliver that very effectively, I think, is amazing. And the first 3 stories, the first half, I find interesting, but they are very messy, like we pointed out. They don't fully explain everything about Dr. Miles and everything that they're supposed to explain.
Yeah, there's a missing.
So that's why I think the second half is more of a complete, like, an amazing effectiveness in terms of delivering a very self-contained story, even though it's in such a unimpenetrable story arc. I think it's a very self-contained story arc, considering it's in the middle of one of the most convoluted stories of all time. You could read it and still just appreciate it as it is, removed from Spider-Man, removed from everything else, I think. But that's my opinion, anyway.
That's fair. I do agree that they told a really good story in a very little amount of time, and you get to care about a lot of different characters in one, in 3 issues. And so the point of this whole entire arc was, like you're saying about Mary Jane being a clone or whatever. The ironic thing is, the whole point of the Clone Saga was to get rid of Peter as Spider-Man and make Ben the permanent Spider-Man, which is why I always find this whole era surreal, because just imagine you're watching a Spider-Man movie, you go read the comics, and Ben Reilly is your Spider-Man. Yeah. But that's why I don't like modern comics and I like old school comics, because old school comics weren't afraid to try something like that, where you would go into the comics and a whole different world will open up with a whole different history, and it wasn't afraid to it wasn't just trying to be an ad for the movies or the cartoons. Mm-hmm. So that's why I find this era fascinating, because this is only 4 years before the movie came out, and it almost took Spider-Man in a completely different direction, where he had a completely different backstory than what we were familiar with. I can respect that. This was great. I really enjoyed reading this, I will say. This is one of my favorite Spider-Man things I've read, too.
You don't have to know if I like it. Darryl liked the first half more. You don't like the second half at all?
Yeah. Thought the first half was really stellar, and I feel like the second half, again, it was good for what it was. It's just not my speed at all, and I wasn't that interested.
Do you like reading the war stories?
Not really.
Oh.
I mean, I'd have to really think hard about.
You liked the question stuff in.
And you say you like Smoke.
Oh shit! Yeah, that was good.
You say you like Smoke Man. You're a fucking liar.
Yeah, I do like that. I like that more than.
I thought they were so similar. I'm pushing on this crime syndicate. Give me your. Yeah, whatever.
And the thing I learned is you can never catch down the contradiction. You can point out like why you like this and that, and Darryl just be like, I don't know, this is better. Fuck you, Sly. So I'm like, whatever.
Yeah. So. Cool.
Who knows?
Yeah, so Darryl usually does.
Oh yeah, outro.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
Real quick, if you want to listen to Flying Machine Network, this is gonna be bad. But Ryan, if you're missing Ryan, he has up another blog post on the FlyingMachine.network website where he writes about bands and music and albums that he's trying to digest in a year of very terrible politics. And he wrote about Green by REM. So if you're an REM fan, see what Ryan has to say about it. And you can listen to the audio episodes on our Franz Radio Network.
Mike asked me, how do you like Kaine? Why is he such a good character? And Ryan said he really loves Kaine too. He's up there in his Spider-Man characters. This is a plug for our Patreon. In our Patreon, we talked about sympathetic villains and how to do them wrong, basically, for the most part. Basically, how Vegeta, he blew up a planets and they just kind of ignored it and he just became a good guy. Or how in Bleach, just the character equivalent of a Nazi scientist,
Joseph Mengele,
he keeps doing what he does basically, but he just becomes part of a good team. So the reason why Kaine is my favorite Spider-Man character by a mile is Kaine, and this is why example of why I always feel like I'm nitpicking about like modern comics or like Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that. But I can point to examples of stuff that did it well, and I really love it when they do it well. So Kaine is basically if like Vegeta or like the Mangala character from Bleach were done well, because Kaine is a serial killer. He murdered people, and he's a straight up villain. In the modern comics, he gets cured of his cellular degeneration, and he basically is able to live his life normally. And because of that, what he did in his past, he's basically personality-wise, he's interesting because he's not a superhero type. In his first appearance, in his first issue as a solo hero, he saves an old lady walking across the street, and like Spider-Man would be like, "Oh, you should be careful walking across the street," like yuck yuck. He literally curses at this old lady, saying, "You fucking dumb bitch! What the fuck are you doing walking across the street? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?" He basically screams at this old lady, because to him, being a superhero is not a natural thing. But to him, he has to be a superhero to make up for all the bad things in his life. Like, and he knows deep down he never will make up for all the people he killed in his life. But he has to try to do good with what the fortunate circumstances he's in now. So basically, he is Spider-Man on steroids. That guilt that Peter feels for Uncle Ben, Kaine feels like a million times, and he knows, like he says it all the time. Like, and a lot of times his past keeps coming back. People whose family members he killed come and fight him all the time, and he says, like, I know deep down I will never be able. Like, it doesn't matter how many people you save, you can never erase the people you killed in the past. But I have to keep trying to write those scales anyway, which is why Kaine, I think, is an example of a reformed villain done well, and why he's my favorite time.
I wouldn't mind seeing more of him. Like, I didn't.
You say you want him to die, so that's.
Well, narratively, I feel like in that story, it was so self-contained that it would make sense for him to die at the end after killing Luis.
Well, like you said, a part of him does die. The good part of him.
Yeah, but it'd be cool if he died.
Okay.
All right. That has been our episode. Next week and the week after that, or 2 weeks from now and the week after that, we're going to be going back to Bleach. But don't worry if you hate Bleach and you're like, why are these assholes still covering it? This is going to be the end of Bleach that we're covering, and it's going to be a wild ride. And that's it. So thank you guys for listening. Oh, I should have died at the end of this.
I've been Kaine.
And I've been Darryl and Sly's Light in the Darkness.
I love the darkness. That means I don't like you. Stay in continuity.